Hey, folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and once again, we have the great Star Parker with me. I love interviewing this sister. She is a phenomenal scholar, thinker, and intellectual, and she's just on top of it. And I just want to emphasize this to my listeners. Go to Amazon.com, put in that search engine, Star Parker. Several of her books will come up. Any book that you buy written by her would be well worth your time, money, and effort. Um, Sister, I know we only have about 15 minutes, and I know you're busy and all. Post the Donald Trump defeat, what does the conservative movement in the United States of America need to do now? What should we focus on?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And thanks for having me back with you and your prestigious audience. I think we're at a moment that the psalmist outlined for us, that there are people mocking, that there are people destroying. And then he asks, if the foundations are destroyed, what will the righteous do? We're at that moment of what do we do? Those that fear God, those that love country, those that understand freedom, free markets, and truth, where do we go from here? What happened as we started seeing our country unravel in record numbers, the Tea Party rose up and said, wait, whoa, we're losing ourselves. Maybe we should redefine our future for our children, for our grandchildren. So they rose up, they got involved once again in their government, something that the founders said don't not be involved in, but a whole lot of folks got very comfortable in their lives. It is a beautiful country that has allowed for a lot of comfort, and people became very comfortable. But at that moment, many rose up and said, we can't do this. We're not going to do this with our political leaders. We're not going to do this to our children and grandchildren. After that movement, I'm going to say they, even we, because I'm a part of the conservative movement, found a voice to say, we're going to have to change some things in Washington. We don't want to get rid of the foundations of the country like the hard left, and especially Black Lives Matters, to destroy it because they feel that it's so systemically racist and that it was founded in evil. No, we just want to shore up what the founders had in mind, a three-part government of we the people. So the people rose up and they found a leader that would be able to speak into the moment. And that leader was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a very provocative candidate and then a really provocative president to speak into this moment in history to say, no, we're not going to allow our country to go down this path to secularism and to socialism without a fight. But as a result of that moment, the left, they pulled out all stops. They just went absolutely crazy. Most of us that are here in Washington that are conservatives have had to readjust our lives. I personally had to move out of my personal home as a result of the threats and the intimidation that the left unleashed on all after that moment of inaugural 2017. We have seen then that passion from the left, who really are invested in atheism, secularism, and socialism, go after anything that's rooted in Christianity, capitalism, or our Constitution. So fast forward to 2020. They had all of their elements in place. They knew that what they were going to do in the midst of a pandemic, that they themselves say, don't let a crisis go to waste, to move themselves into all aspects of power, all spheres of power, and they would do anything to remove Donald Trump. So they did, and they did. And it's so unfortunate that then it culminated in, although the scripture says be angry, but don't sin, it was anger and it ended up with a breach at the Capitol. So now we have an environment to where the left feels that they have a moral high ground to start canceling people out of culture, going horribly after anyone that voices any type of conservative interest, etc. That's the setup to what your question is. Where do we go from here? When the foundations are destroyed, what do the righteous do? They've destroyed every foundation from our intellectual sphere, if you will, the colleges, to be able to dialogue and debate. That's done. They don't want even one little light in there anymore to even say, wait, but. They've destroyed our infrastructure when it comes to the capitalism and the corporations, because even if you do agree with somebody politically, you used to not lose your job. But right now you have major corporations that are doing all of this race stuff and equity stuff so that they can now feel good about themselves. So they're pouring billions of dollars at the hard left to just make them go away. all of the foundations, the family we've been talking about for years and what they did with their welfare state and their war on poverty to dismantle family life and weaken what they've done to the church life, and especially and including the now shutting down because of pandemic. All voices, all foundations are destroyed. So now to your question, what will the righteous do? What do we do as conservatives to move forward? We finish the mourning, we finish the grief, we pick up ourselves, and we go do more of what we were already beginning to do. Take our country. We the people go back to our founding principles that have shored up a freedom, that we the people have the power to excel in this country, that we decide who's going to be our leaders, that we decide who is going to be our judges, that we decide who's going to educate our children, where we can live, how we can worship. And when we do that, we just do it as excellently as we can in whatever your passion area is. Those that want election integrity now, go do that. Do that in the states. There's nothing national you can do about that. Do it in the states. Those that want to war against the cancel culture, go do that, but do it in the states. Those like my organization, we work on poverty issues. Go dismantle government, get them out of the poverty business, what they're really in, and move the church and local communities back in. So if you're in crisis pregnancy work, go save more, because these guys have already started pushing out their abortion agenda all across the world. If you're trying to spare others from this knife of the abortionist, then go make sure you're available for the people that are most vulnerable and help serve at that level. Because right now, in the nation's capital, not much is going to be done or able to get done for the conservative movement. The progressives are in charge, and they are evil.
So we got to go back on the local level, state level, and as you say, pick up whatever your issue is and work on it. Work hard on it.
That's right. But not to the neglect of the national, because we still have elections. We have an election coming into, I think, because there was such a deep mourning after the November, and then especially after the Supreme Court ruled that they're not going to even attempt to look for any fraud or misguidance in what happened in the states that changed their rules right before the November 2020 election and used the excuse of COVID. When that loss happened, people got in grief, as opposed to saying, we got to win Georgia. It was hard to pick up and say, you know what? No, you got to keep going. And so I get that. Unfortunately, I get that, because, the Senate was lost for conservatives as a result. But it's not over. The game is not over. In fact, some senators can switch parties in negotiations. There's some guys that are wondering why the Democrat Party has left them, and maybe they're doable. You can't tell them how evil they are and how bad they are to win them, but there are those that can go in with that heart of compassion. But we also have an election in 2 years. We not only have an election in 2 years for the House, we have an election in 2 years for Senate seats. There are a lot of Senate seats up. And I think that one of the problems that I'm seeing with the conservative right at this point, and more particularly with the Tea Party right, and the trumpets, or what I'm calling the MAGAites, is that they are so angry that they think that their first enemy are other Republicans. The fellow Republicans are not your enemy, just like your family. Your immediate family is not your enemy. You may have disagreements, but they're not your enemy. The guy next door is your enemy because he's trying to kill you. And what's happening right now is that progressive left is trying to kill all of our founding principles, all 3 C's: Christianity, capitalism, and our Constitution. They want the whole thing wiped out. So therefore, we need to pick ourselves up and say, wait a minute, that fellow Republican is not my primary enemy. Right now, we need to beat the left. So we do have election in 2 years. We have elections in 4 years, and we have elections every 6 years. So that's still the beauty of America, and we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're absolutely correct, because that's what happened to me. I just sort of said, oh my God, we lost. I didn't expect us to lose. I couldn't believe that the nation went with Biden, and I just became despondent. Half the nation, right? But
let me tell you, we should have been able to see it. For people that are really looking and listening, half the nation has been telling pollsters forever that they're buying these ideas of socialism. Half the nation forever has felt that they're the underdog. No, this is our fault. This is our fault. We didn't notice that the nation was not only browning, but the browning of our nation were trapped in government schools, hearing only one view. They're trapped in watching ABC, NBC, CBS. They don't have money to go buy cable to where they can get a second view. They were trapped in zip codes to where this is all they heard. They could not, the Bible's very clear. Everything sounds good until you hear the other side. And we forgot to tell the other side to half of the country. And we got so close to that number that, yes, it overwhelmed us. I knew that Biden was going to win that election in that first debate against Donald Trump, when he said 1 in 1,000 Black people have died from COVID. It was over. Most people missed it. Even the Trump administration missed it. The RNC missed it. But Black people heard it because they knew somebody had died. Mm-hmm. And this is what we as a conservative movement have to understand, that while we're arguing against socialism, half the country already lives in socialism. They've never experienced freedom. Everything they know is controlled by government. Their schools, their zip codes, their jobs, their healthcare. We have a great task to go and teach freedom and free markets in our most vulnerable zip codes, to let the folks that are trapped there more often than not know that these freedom and free market ideas are of their best interest, not someone else's interest, but their interest. And we've been missing it for quite some time. And so this one, as hard as it is, it was anticipated. It could have been anticipated and maybe even avoided if we were really assessing the way that we assess doing other types of business.
Mm-hmm. Since you had talked about, that, a good part of the nation is already living in socialism. It's all they've ever known is major government intervention, but it seems like such a difficult task. I mean, is it an impossible task to be able to educate people about, as you say, free markets, free enterprise, et cetera?
Well, I don't think so. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing my work at CURE. What we've done at the Center for Urban Renewal and Education is we believe that, and especially I believe as a founder, that everybody has the opportunity to be saved. Everybody has the opportunity to learn and to grow. In fact, somebody, and one a great philosopher, in fact, I think it was some entertainer guy, said everybody's ignorant of something. And so what you see what you do when you see ignorance is you try to educate. So we are either buying this idea that, they're not educatable, never mind, or we're saying that, maybe they just don't have enough information. So if you're asking me, can we go into certain zip codes and tell the truth? Why not? What we're doing at CURE is saying, why don't we just start with the clergy? Because if the clergy start to get it, then they can teach it to their congregation. So it just depends on the approach. I think that one of the things we've grown accustomed to over the last 20 years, at least, maybe even longer than that, but at least for the last 20 years, is this attachment to government. If we get the feds to do it, I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's not how the country was designed. It was really designed, we the people. That means you have to constantly stay active. We grew comfortable. The middle class and upper middle class grew very comfortable, while those that were newly coming to the country and those that were entrenched and trapped in these impoverished zip codes were getting weaker and weaker. And now their numbers have grown and it overwhelmed us, took over, and we've got real problems as a result.
Okay. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and we have with us Star Parker. Sister, we just have a few minutes left, but before I conclude, your website is urbancure.org. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Right. So if people want to get more information about your organization, and I hope they do, go to urbancure.org. Now, your organization exclusively works with ministers, is that correct?
Well, we don't exclusively. No, we have a 3-pronged program. And in fact, over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see us unveil now as a policy institute here in Washington. We spent quite a bit of time since I founded the group 25 years ago on the activism arm of it, on the media arm of it, and then with our clergy arm of it. But we're now going more into the policy arena, especially as this Biden administration has pushed out their little racial equity agenda, which means that they're going to go into every single department here, agency here, act here, commission here, and a committee here to to promote that America is systemically racist. So the ultimate result should be a reparation. So we're going to start peeling away at that philosophy and fighting those types of propositions that they put in place as a policy institute. So it's three-pronged. We do policy, we do media, we own blackcommunitynews.com to get the messaging out to that church community. And then we do have a pastor network that is living and breathing in these zip codes, really trying to help those, that little lost sheep, those that are the least of these. So that's the essence of the organization, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. We fight poverty, we restore dignity through messages of faith, of freedom, and of personal responsibility.
Fantastic. So one last question. It's a little off topic. I've been hearing more and more about the Biden administration pushing for a $15 an hour minimum wage. What are some of your thoughts on that? And some people would say, well, I mean, how can you be opposed to the minimum wage going to $15 if you're trying to combat poverty?
Right. Well, it's interesting to ask about that because that's one of the big issues that CURE has been working on over the last couple of weeks to fight it back. And we think we've won that battle, that the Biden administration now, and not just has heard from us, but from many across the country, say this is not a good idea. In a nutshell, the reason it's not a good idea, you can ask any woman, one size fits all doesn't. We know it. Size 2 and 22 is not the same. It's not going to fit. So now you have 50 different states. You have 350 million people. One size fits all doesn't work. Some states may need a higher wage to live in. Other states don't. So what happens when you say, well, we're just going to blanket and arbitrarily pick a wage out of the thin air because we think that it's livable based on wherever we may have come from, certainly not based on any kind of science, will cripple other states. Will cripple people. Will help them lose their jobs. We're not now only talking first rung. You hear a lot about first rung. McDonald's has now have to pay everybody $15 an hour. Well, they have to have somebody clean the place. They have to have somebody cooking the food. So if the cleaner now is making $15 an hour, then that means the cook has to make $20 an hour. Well, if the cook is making $20 an hour, what's the cashier making? Nothing, because she can be replaced with a machine. So we have to be concerned there. But a bigger concern for me is not just first rung. It's also those people that are now willing to put their interests on the table to start businesses, those mom and pops. When you think about the African-American community, because of the deregulation and the reduction in taxation that the Trump administration did, it just actually helped the Black community, and especially the upper middle class Black community, to where record numbers started going into business. As a result of them going into business, they're in the process now of growing those mom and pops into hiring new employees. The last thing you need to do, especially post-COVID, they're barely surviving now because of COVID. The last thing you need to do is tell them, we've just increased your prices to be able to go out and buy some labor. That's not good for any part of our society to get in the middle of business interests as a government, but it's certainly not helping the poor that are in some of our most poor states and communities.
Wow. Folks, I'm telling you, I really should be ashamed of myself for trying to keep this sister limited to 15 minutes. She's.
I'll just have to come back on with you. How's that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have no problem with that. Thank you. I mean, you're a college professor, man. Any subject, you're something else. Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and we just had on here Star Parker. Again, go to Amazon.com, put in her name in the search engine. And any one of her books that you buy, it's worth the price. It's worth the effort to read. Sis, we're going to have to conclude it here. I do hope and pray that we are able to have you on again sometime in the near future.
I will definitely come back on with you. Thank you so much for having me, Corbin.
Thank you, ma'am.